I collapsed alone on my kitchen floor at 60 years old, burning with fever and completely unable to stand. Terrified, I reached for my phone and called my 4 adult children, begging someone to come help me. My oldest son, Holden, told me he was too busy with corporate meetings and snapped that he couldn't just drop everything. My second son, Sterling, ignored my calls and texted hours later saying he was stuck on a construction job. My youngest son, Grayson, claimed he couldn't leave because his in-laws were visiting and told me to just call an ambulance. They all muttered the exact same excuse. We have our own lives, Mom. But the deepest stab to my heart came from my only daughter, Sloane. She didn't even pick up, sending a cold, 4-word text instead. Not my problem. Call an ambulance. Lying on the freezing tile, waiting for those cruel words to somehow change meaning, I realized no one was coming. I managed to dial 911 myself with shaking hands. Hours later, I found myself sitting entirely alone on a plastic chair in a crowded hospital hallway because there were no private rooms available. A young resident sat across from me and delivered a devastating blow. They had found a mass that needed an immediate biopsy, and my heart was under severe strain. As I sat there in my nightgown and cardigan, watching a janitor mindlessly mop the floor and listening to the hum of a vending machine, the crushing weight of my 60 years pressed down on me. I had been a widow for 11 years, raising these 4 children on a tight second-grade teacher's salary. I had skipped vacations, sewn clothes by hand, co-signed loans, and sacrificed my entire youth out of pure love, never keeping score. Yet at the most terrifying moment of my life, facing a potential cancer diagnosis, I was treated like disposable furniture by the very people I gave everything to. I considered calling my children again to tell them the medical news, but something inside me went completely numb. That was when my phone rang. It wasn't my children. It was my 24-year-old granddaughter, Everly, Holden's daughter. She was a young nurse working 2 towns over, just calling for her usual weekly check-in. The moment she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. Unlike her father, Everly had put herself through nursing school entirely on her own, working exhausting night shifts at a diner because her parents refused to help with her tuition. She understood what it meant to carry heavy burdens in silence. When I broke down and told her about the collapse, the hospital, and the abandonment by my own children, the line went quiet. Then she said, "I'm coming right now, Grandma. Don't you dare think you're a burden." 40 minutes later, Everly rushed into that fluorescent hallway, still wearing her scrubs and smelling of hospital hand sanitizer. She sat next to me on that plastic chair and tightly held my hand. She didn't ask where her father was or make excuses for the family. She simply chose to be my rock. Everly stayed by my side through the biopsy and the overnight heart observations. She slept in an uncomfortable hospital recliner for 2 nights straight, leaving only to shower before returning. She advocated for me, translated complex medical jargon, and held my hand when the results came back. It was cancer. It was early stage and treatable, but it was cancer. 3 days after my diagnosis, my 3 sons sent a single detached group text. "Hope you're feeling better, Mum." Sloane never reached out at all. Not a single one of my children asked about my test results, offered to drive me to treatments, or checked if I needed help with bills. For the next 6 months, only Everly showed up. She drove 40 minutes each way after her own grueling 12-hour shifts to sit with me during chemotherapy infusions. She cooked homemade soup when the hospital food made me sick. One night, my fever spiked dangerously high and I was too nauseated to keep water down. Everly calmly ran a cool bath for me and stayed until 4 in the morning to stabilize my fever before driving straight to her own nursing shift without a single minute of sleep. She never complained, and she never demanded praise. Meanwhile, Grayson texted me mid-treatment, completely ignoring my bald head and frail frame, asking if I could babysit his kids for a weekend getaway. When I told him I wasn't strong enough, he didn't even reply to ask why. During those dark months of chemotherapy, a profound shift occurred within me. I stopped staring at my phone, hoping for a sliver of maternal validation from my children. I let that old hope die quietly, the way you stop watering a withered plant. I forced myself to see the truth, instead of the illusions I had spent years manufacturing. I remembered how Holden borrowed thousands for a house down payment and never repaid a dime. I remembered how Sterling used my address for years to dodge high insurance rates without a single thank you. I remembered how Sloane called me needy and hung up the phone years ago just because I asked why she never called to chat. I had spent decades excusing their selfishness as the natural byproduct of raising independent adults. But lying on that kitchen floor had shattered my denial. 4 grown adults I had sacrificed my life for found it easier to say no than to cross town for their dying mother, while a granddaughter who owed me absolutely nothing had sacrificed everything to save me. 6 months into my recovery, my doctors delivered a miracle. My scans were completely clear. The cancer was gone, and my heart had stabilized. That very same month, an unexpected ghost from the past emerged. My late husband's former business partner passed away, and buried deep within his estate, paperwork was an overlooked profit-sharing clause from their original partnership agreement decades earlier. The estate lawyers tracked me down to settle the debt, presenting me with a check for just under $400,000. I kept the money a secret at first. For the first time in my life, I had a safety net that belonged entirely to me, and I refused to share the news with people who hadn't shared their time with me during my darkest hour. Every time the old motherly instinct urged me to call my kids and celebrate, the memory of that lonely plastic chair and Sloane's "not my problem" text anchored me back to reality. I used a portion of the funds to retire early from substitute teaching and fix my damaged roof. Then I scheduled an appointment with an estate attorney to execute a plan I had been quietly formulating. I completely rewrote my will, stripping my 3 sons and daughter of any inheritance. In their place, I named Everly as the primary beneficiary of my entire estate. I also established a modest scholarship fund at the local community college to provide practical, unglamorous supplies for struggling nursing students, the exact kind of support nobody had offered Everly when she was surviving on diner shifts. This wasn't an act of vengeance, it was an act of justice. One person had given me her whole heart with 0 expectations, while 4 others expected everything while giving absolutely nothing. Secrets never stay buried for long in a family. Sterling's wife eventually heard rumors about the business settlement and let it slip. Within a week, the 4 children who had abandoned me for nearly a year suddenly remembered my phone number. Holden called, radiating false warmth, asking about my health as if he hadn't been 9 months late to the conversation. Sterling texted, offering to do home repairs now that I had funds. Grayson suddenly invited me to Sunday dinner, and Sloane left a sweet voicemail claiming she had been thinking about me and wanted to reconnect. I let their calls sit unanswered for days, matching the exact timeline of neglect they gave me when I was paralyzed on my kitchen floor. Then, I invited all 4 of them, along with Everly, to my house for Sunday dinner. I cooked the traditional childhood meals they loved, sitting back quietly as they laughed, ate dessert, and casually assumed we were stepping right back into our old dynamics. Once the table was cleared, I placed a legal folder in front of them. In a calm, steady voice, I explained the financial settlement and laid out the terms of my new will. I told them that Everly would inherit everything, and that a nursing scholarship had been finalized in her honor. I looked my children in the eyes and told them that while my maternal love for them would never simply switch off, love and inheritance are not the same transaction. Showing up only when money is on the table is not the same as showing up when your mother is begging for help on a kitchen floor. Sloane instantly exploded into anger, accusing me of being dramatic and punishing them for a single missed phone call on a busy day. I looked at her and replied that it wasn't a single day, it was the 9 months of absolute silence that followed. To prove my point, I challenged them with basic questions. I asked Sloane the date of my diagnosis. She remained silent. I asked Holden what my biopsy results showed. He admitted he didn't even know there was a biopsy. I asked Sterling how many times he visited me during 6 months of chemotherapy. He looked at the floor and muttered that the answer was 0. Finally, I asked Grayson if he remembered the text his sister sent me while I lay paralyzed. He glanced at Sloane, and a wave of genuine crushing shame washed over his face. Holden tried to defend them by saying they didn't realize it was that serious, but the excuse rang hollow. You cannot rewrite a year of abandonment with a single evening of good intentions driven by greed. I didn't yell or shed a single tear that night. I simply informed them that the legal paperwork was already filed. They were entirely welcome to remain in my life as my children, but they would never be heirs waiting for a financial payout they refused to earn.